Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili, Gianarakos, back for another episode of Getting Gritty with It. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Doing well, my friend. We actually have a lot to talk about, considering it's kind of been a dead period for the Flyers. They've been done their season for a while now. Crazy thing is, we're heading into the Stanley Cup final, so already it's not even June. So yeah, doing well, man, and excited for another one here.
Yeah, man. Surprising, right? We were just talking about it off camera. We're like, oh, this is like a full episode.
Yeah.
We're really squeezing the juice. But to be honest with you guys, and I guess I'll do a little shout out here. Please like, subscribe, share, hit the little bell as well if you want to be updated immediately when we upload at any point. All that stuff, again, is extremely helpful to us, and if you want to support us, is the best way to do it. And the comments and everything, please, even if you don't agree, I don't mind. Go. Tell us you disagree.
Yeah, we're open to everyone's opinions.
Yeah,
Exactly.
this is not the type of conversation where if we disagree with you, you're not allowed part of the conversation. That's silly to me. So please continue, comment. All that has been amazing. We've seen the growth. And thank you again. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about because there's things happening slowly in the background. There's stuff happening around the league. There are players playing in places. So topic-wise today, we're going to talk about some changes within the Flyers staff. We'll talk about the World Junior Championships, a little bit about Gauthier, a little bit about Lawton. We'll talk about how the game has evolved. We'll talk about rumors as well with, some trades about Briere, making some comments on WIP. Also Broad Street Hockey interview. He had a pretty good interview with them as well. We'll talk about some rumors with Drager. We'll talk about some other stuff with D'Angelo, rumors, Provorov. Then prospect talk a little bit. Talk about a little Michkov, maybe a little bit of Will Smith, maybe anybody else that comes up. A little bit of Attard, Zamula, and then we'll wrap up with playoffs. So again, a pretty big docket there. Let's get started. So, Vasili, let's go into our first piece of news. As of, I think it was today, as we record this, things are a little bit of a blur.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Mike O'Connell and John Riley have been let go by the organization. They were both player development focused senior advisors. I believe they were both senior advisors. So they were let go, and now Riley Armstrong, who was working with the Phantoms, has now been promoted to that position. I think he was the assistant coach for the Phantoms at portions this year. This is not that surprising considering the public perception, but from what I understand, Vasili, I believe you added this note here that O'Connell at 67 was considering retirement. So maybe this was a little bit more of like, hey, we know you were kind of considering it anyway. Maybe you're kind of losing it a little bit. We want to bring somebody a little bit newer, fresher. And you can tell the Flyers invest. I don't think this is going to be the end of those changes. Vasili, what are you thinking, man?
Yeah, so for O'Connell, he was the senior advisor of player development. I think Riley was just kind of a member of the team there.
Thank
I
you.
know for O'Connell as well. Shout out to Anthony DeMarco because he had that little tidbit about him potentially retiring in his article from the other day. So that was a great bit of news that he kind of brought forth. But I understand kind of the letting go of O'Connell and Riley there and kind of promoting from within and bringing one of the Phantoms assistants. It makes sense because you see a lot of the young guys in the Phantoms having success, so I'm sure he is having a part in that. The new director, I guess, of player development there. So obviously when you see those two get let go, I think that's a part of it, that he had so much success with the Phantoms, and that Riley Armstrong, I mean, should be able to hopefully bring that and that vision that he kind of showed there and apply it at a kind of a broader level. We'll see what he does. Personally, for O'Connell, he was really only hired a couple of years back. I'm not sure that he is kind of the guy that's done a terrible job, because you look at some of the guys that have also come up under him, like a Cam York and a Zamula, and Attard's doing pretty well with his development. You see Tyson Forster, he's probably had a hand in it as well. So I wouldn't say it's like a terrible job for him or anything like that. It could just be the end of the line and some new fresh voices, right?
I think you nailed it. I think everything you said, you nailed. I do believe it's something around those lines. It is a little surprising, right? Because it wasn't necessarily bad this year.
Yeah,
I know that like we've kind of missed the mark in ways, but I felt like things were actually moving in the right direction.
progressing. Yeah,
Right. There's obviously a large group of people involved in all of this, and leadership, higher up, at least more senior positions, they're the way to make the bigger impact. So you're looking maybe to jolt things up. But what that tells me, Vasili, too, is that I do expect more young players to be added, not just at the NHL level, like everybody assumes, but at the AHL level. That, this team did pretty well, but there are some guys who are probably going to move on. Like Cal O'Reilly, is he going to come back for another year? I mean, he might retire at this point. He was barely holding on to fourth line center on the Phantoms. There's some other guys who are going to make their way up. It does feel like, already we heard the rumors, and I think we misreported it a while back as a done deal. But who was oh man, the name is escaping right now.
Alan McCauley.
Alan McCauley. Thank you so much. Alan McCauley was promoted. So we know that that's happening potentially to run the Phantoms. Looks like that's kind of what Briere is tackling slowly in the background here is the Phantoms and the pipeline. If he's going to be inserting players into it, is it ready for that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I think to Riley Armstrong kind of getting bumped there, I think his effect on the Phantoms probably is a big reason as to why, right? Like I mentioned it before, and it's kind of hard to ignore those results with some of those younger guys. I mean, you have success as some of them did, and even coming to the NHL level, I'm sure he's played a part. Another thing I wanted to add, and shout out to Tony Andrikidis. He covers a ton of stuff in the AHL. He sent a tweet out. Yeah, I sent a tweet out earlier today, kind of about some other additions and subtractions in terms of like player development. So he was hearing that Brady Robinson is going to remain the goalie development coach, and Shel Samuelson will remain in the organization as well, but it won't be on the player development side. So there's still a lot of like inner workings right now happening. So I assume as like we get closer to the draft, they'll probably finalize that and go with their staff. So we might even see in the coming weeks some more stuff, right?
Changing out Shel Samuelson would be a pretty big deal. I mean, he's been in charge of a lot of defensemen that have come in through this organization. Maybe that's why. I very much respect Shel, so I'm not going to say anything bad about him. But you can look at the Flyers' success on developing the back end, and outside of Provorov, there hasn't been a single defenseman developed internally that's hit like that number one status. Provorov was able to do it, like about 2-3 years of a 7-year career. So, it's kind of been shoddy. They haven't had a clear cut number one guy in a while who's been developed internally.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to say that that's Shel Samuelson's fault, but again, I do see this is probably Briere's first target is
and it's results-based business. So they kind of look at like, okay, how has the success been in the past from this perspective? And they say, okay, well, it could be better. So let's try to see if we can make some changes to kind of get that to happen, right?
But he's also been close to that problem too, right? If you think about where Danny Briere was sitting for a little bit.
I mentioned this on previous episodes, right? Like in the press conferences, Briere was saying as he worked as a special assistant, it allowed him to familiarize himself with a bunch of different departments and things like that. And I kind of mentioned that in a sense, it's what you want because you almost have a guy self-auditing the previous regime saying, okay, this is what's not working. I can clearly see it. And this is where we need to really like change the pressure points and kind of do things differently to get some more results, right? So
yeah, and without having the authority to like walk around firing people are kind of behaving as themselves around him.
Yeah, they're open around you, exactly.
Right. And now it's kind of I don't know. I think people always suspected that he would. Again, it's Danny Briere. I'm not saying that people like are being lazy around him, but I'm saying like he had more of an even keel relationship with them. Now he's kind of an upper level. He has his thoughts, and this is a guy who to some degree is a product of the old NHL. And this is why people say it's a young man's game, because of the financial reasons today. We're a lot more open to youth, and we're a lot more open to having young players making a lot of money because teams can want to take that risk because of the problems with the salary cap. You got to bring in guys through the pipeline now. So you got to be able to take those risks. So they kind of soften things over time. And I think we're watching the results of that today. And I think Danny Briere growing up in today's NHL probably wouldn't have been waived. I don't think he would have been a player who would have been waived. I think that is a consequence of the old NHL. And I think he's probably pretty sensitive about that development process and mentally getting those players to a maturity level of a guy like Sean Couturier who can come into the NHL at 18, 19 years old. Same with Farabee. Like it's very difficult to do these things, like Carter Hart. But hopefully Danny Briere's got a good blueprint in his head on how to make that happen.
Yeah, it seems like the plan's kind of already in motion, and like I was saying before, I think just with everything in the shuffle in a couple weeks still before the draft, we'll probably see maybe some more switches around and changes in the front office, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to our next topic. Let's move on to World Junior Champions. Sorry, I'm taking an audio note for once.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so World Junior Champions wrap up. Canada wins gold. US loses the bronze game to Latvia. And then we'll talk about a little bit of Cutter Gauthier's performance. We did kind of drool over him an episode ago, but we'll still talk about him a little bit more. So let's talk about Canada first. Let's get that out of the way since the US is kind of what's closer to us. Canada wins gold over Germany, 5-2 win. Scott Lawton obviously is a big part of that team. He walks away with a championship, some publicity as well. First thing I want to say, obviously USA should have been in that game, didn't play well enough in the end. I thought they'd be there. But it's nice to see that Germany's program is really getting better. Again, I recommend this for everybody who's like a hockey nerd about this stuff that listens to us. Go to Hockey DB, find the draft players list, and go look at players, and it's fascinating. I've pointed out on this podcast before, Germany's program is growing so fast.
It is.
So
finishes like this too help a country like that kind of grow a program, right? Like the World Hockey Championships is a huge tournament. And the fact that, kids are seeing, let's say German kids are seeing that team do so well and have success, it's going to inspire them to maybe pick up the sport of hockey. So I think it's a great thing. And even the same thing kind of goes for Latvia, right? Making it so far and winning the bronze medal against the US, like that's, I think their first medal ever in this tournament. And usually they don't get this far. Typically it's tough for them to get out of the group stage. So the fact that they win a bronze medal, I mean, think about all the Latvian kids kind of seeing that, and that will inspire them and their hockey program. So it's huge for hockey across the world. And yep. I would say for Latvia, like it's just an amazing moment because even them winning a bronze, I think they declared a national holiday the next day. So like that's a crazy celebration. So like congrats even on a bronze medal to them. But yeah, like Canada wins the gold. Scott Lawton gets gold there. There was a disgusting goal by Adam Fantilli against Latvia in the semifinals where he like inside outs a guy, puts it through the gap in the stick and the defenseman when he's poking out, and then he puts it back through the defenseman's legs and then just rips it in, and you're like, okay, this kid is insane.
He's obviously legit. Yeah. We know.
Crazy goal though.
It's gonna be tough to watch him get drafted.
Yeah, I mean for the US though, and them losing out to Germany in OT and then to Latvia again in OT, it's a tough tournament because they played really, really well, and 2 OT losses is tough kind of to go by because when it's sudden death like that, right, it can kind of go either way. So obviously that's not the results the US are looking for, but I still think they had like a really, really good tournament. And just to recap, I want to go over like the leading score. So Rocco Grimaldi actually was the leading scorer in the tournament. He had 14 points, 7 goals and 7 assists. And then Dominic Kubalik second there. In 8 games, he had 8 goals and 4 assists. And then some other notables is Mackenzie Weegar, 10 games, he had 3 goals, 8 assists for 11 points. Cutter Gauthier, in 10 goals, he had 10 games, he had 7 goals and 2 assists for 9 points. And then below Cutter there, you have Lawson Krause, who had 9 points in 10 games, and then Nikolai Ehlers, who had 9 points in 7 games there.
Yeah. So obviously not a series, full of high performers, but I will say this, Cutter Gauthier did outscore Adam Fantilli in this tournament. So did he dominate? Who really did Adam Fantilli really dominate this tournament?
He had a good tournament. I would
joking.
Say joking. I would say Gauthier definitely at points dominated. And like they're
young. They're gonna be ups and downs, and obviously Fantilli's highs are very high, and same with Gauthier.
Yeah, Gauthier had a great tournament. I mean, he had 7 goals, 9 points, 51 shots. The next highest was 29, so he led the tournament in shots, which is very impressive.
Yes.
and
yes, a player who shoots too much.
literally. But
we haven't had one of those in years.
Yeah, he was on the ice too for 11 goals for and only one against. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive for a young guy just to show the defensive prowess. So I just wanted to bring that up as well.
I love that, dude. Actually, it makes me think about something we were talking about when he was drafted, when people were saying, "Oh, he's not elite talent." Like, dude, I love the
There's a lot of fastness to his game. Like, he has a really great shot for a bigger guy, skates really well, has a lot more playmaking vision than people give him credit for, and defensively, like, he's responsible, as you can see. I mean, you're only on the ice for 1 goal against across a whole tournament where you're playing 10 games. It's pretty good. Like,
yeah. Well, this is what I was saying. It's like, look, there are very rare guarantees at star players. What they drafted is a mold. You look at his assets, his shot, his size, his skating, his playmaking. You don't know how that's going to pan out. He could stop developing and not have the work ethic you think, and he doesn't turn into that guy. But if he's got a work ethic, which I think Cutter Gauthier definitely does, and he continues to progress on these things and add and adjust and be that, he's got all the mold of a star player. He's obviously doing that. We don't know the level and degree, whether he's going to be a 60-point player, 100-point player, who knows? Anybody who says he's definitely not going to be a 100-point player, I don't know why. I can't tell you he's definitely going to be anything. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't tell you he's definitely going to be anything at this point, but we do see the signs of why he was drafted 5th overall. And if he was a mean player, which he is not, and I think people will be a little disappointed that he's more of a Jeff Carter than a Matthews to Chuck. But if he had that nastiness, which maybe he'll grow into a little bit, that's like a perfect number 5 pick. I mean,
yeah, really good.
For
wasn't Kachuk a 5th overall pick as well?
Yes, he was.
Isn't that a funny comparison when you think about it? I'm not saying that's going to be the same thing, but it's just
different type of players.
It kind of shows, though, right? Like, think about the talent you can get at number 5. There's like number 5 is not low in the draft. Dude, it's a very high pick.
I swear to God, dude. This is what I was saying. Like, the draft starts off with, oh my God, a year from now, there's going to be all these amazing players. And by the time you get to the draft, people are telling you, hey, by 5,
everybody sucks except for
it's a big drop off.
Yeah.
It's a big, dude. I'll be honest with you guys right now. I'll say it a little bit earlier. It's like, I don't think that these rankings that we have matter at all. I think this draft is way too skilled for anybody to be able to predict anything beyond 2 at this point. And like, the idea that a Michkov is even 4 or 5. That's insane.
We're going to get into him.
It's going to be curveballs. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's going to be curveballs. Just
Definitely.
expect curveballs in this draft. Too much talent. I saw somebody saying that, what's his name? Ryan Bacher was going to go at 6. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Like, how could you even draft a defenseman unless the guy is a number 1 defenseman over any of these names? Like, Zach Benson is a top 3 pick every fucking year except for this year. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of really good forwards. Like, I would be surprised. I mean, unless a team really reaches,
like that kid.
Unless a team really reaches for defense, like, because it's a need for them. It's hard to see a defenseman going like before 8 or 9. I would say, right? Like,
it's just too
even
much.
In the top 10.
There's too much talent. There's too many guys who are top 10.
Yeah.
Top 5 in
most.
Well,
It's the age-old thing. It's the age-old debate, right, between scouts where, okay, should we go with the 5th best ranked forward or should we go with the number 1 ranked defenseman?
Yes.
Which I get it from that perspective, but sometimes just because somebody's the number 1 ranked in something doesn't mean they match the skill level of the other individual who's 5th ranked. It just means that, okay, in that respective position, they happen to be first, but the talent isn't on the same level, right?
I will say this. I would not be surprised at all if one of the defensemen drafted in this draft ends up being one of the best defensemen in the NHL.
I could definitely. I mean, it would be just very ironic, just because it's been so low key on defensemen
all the time.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Duncan Keith was a low key.
Well, nobody.
Roman Yossi,
even Cale Makar, like nobody thought to the effect that he was going to be what he was when he was drafted, right? So
that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like all of these draft prediction stuff. You start realizing how inaccurate it really is, and how to take it all with a grain of salt. And then salt, sand, ice,
all that stuff,
all the elements.
But literally, like, you have to think about it this way, right? Unless you're the like professional scouts who are constantly watching these guys, or other independent media that like make it their business to kind of scout these players and put out these draft rankings and draft reviews and things like that. Like, let's be real, we're not sitting down watching these young guys play enough games to really say, okay, this is why I want this guy to be taken here, and this is the reason. Like, unless you're actually putting in the time to watch that, it's kind of hard to give an accurate opinion, right? And we're not experts by any means either. So
100%, but even the experts will admit that it is.
I only saw this guy 5 times live. Like, you can't predict what he's going to be, right?
And and it's not just that. You have to like really dig. You have to find out who this person is. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big way.
Personality is a big thing.
It's humongous. And then there's also the luck element with health, and that's obviously screwed us over recently. Like, anybody who thinks that Nolan Patrick wasn't talented enough for the NHL level, I think that's crazy.
He had a lot of talent.
Yeah, the talent wasn't an issue. It obviously was a physical problem. And again, good luck to Nolan Patrick, who I believe is not slated to play next season as of right now. I didn't hear anything about it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he's still kind of on the IR there. So
good luck to him. Yeah, but okay. So, what do you want to say more about Gauthier? I mean, the guy finishes strong. We know he's going to be a good talent. I mean, really, at this point, it's like, let's see who he's going to. He's going to be beefed up with a brand new team next year with a fresh new line from the USNTDP to help him out. They're probably going to be one of the best teams in college hockey, I assume. So next year's a big year for him. I mean, does anything change for you, I guess, at this point? The fact that they fell short, his age compared to his teammates.
Yeah,
it's hard for me to say, oh, Gauthier fell short.
I mean, he's one of the highest producing players, for a 19 under player ever to grace the tournament. So when you look at it from that perspective to his age and other players at that age of playing the tournament, I don't think there's anything to be worried about. Had a great tournament. Sometimes, in the bigger moments, it can be a learning experience, right? Like, he didn't have the best last 2 games in terms of like getting on the score sheet, but it's something I think that he could take and learn from and say, okay, like, these were really meaningful games, high stakes. What do I have to do in these situations next time that I didn't do this time around that can help me improve, right? So I think in the sense it's a good thing. And also, if you look at the US, like, it's not like they really had a stacked team or anything, or like bona fide star guys that could really.
He was pretty much it.
Yeah, exactly. That was like, okay, this is a big name, right? So like, I think veterans to lean on that could help him there. I don't think like he really had all the help he could ask for in that situation too. So I think that's kind of a reason why
I'm happy. I'll be honest with you. I'm happy about it. The guy that they put him with, what's his name? Tennyson, I think his name. The guy had exactly like 80 some assists in the AHL this year.
Yeah, he was like 31 years old. He's a veteran. He had like 13. I looked him up. He had like 13 goals, like 82 assists or something. I'm like, oh, okay, this guy's like the I don't even know, like Erik Karlsson on offense.
Well, I think that's what I liked about it, is like, that should prove to everybody that the way he played, he would already be the top line player for the Phantoms. Just for everybody, just to put that. This is why I love college hockey, is because college hockey is more difficult than juniors hockey. And I like that. I like that. Again, it tests the physical element of it too. And I know him playing college hockey will prepare him for the AHL, as we can see already by what he's doing. And it, again, in my opinion, I don't think Cutter Gauthier touches the AHL personally.
Yeah, I think he'd start with the Flyers, but we'll see, right?
If he were to come this year, yes, I think he starts with the Phantoms. But the fact he's coming the following year,
yeah, exactly,
he's already producing this way at this tournament. He had another 12 months onto that, and probably, assuming his team doesn't make the final, we don't know, but he might join the Phantoms or even the Flyers at the end of the year, to get a taste of pro hockey. We'll see. Okay. Anything else you want to say about Gauthier? Sorry, I don't want to cut you off there.
No, we're all good.
Okay. Let me take another timestamp here, because I got to get used to this because I'm bad at it, and that's why there are no timestamps in anything.
Yeah, we're trying to add it in, like we've heard you guys say. Basically, what we would do in the past, instead of doing it live, is I would listen back and be like, okay, this is the time. But like, sometimes if you're busy with work and stuff, you don't have time. So we're trying to do it this way now, and hopefully now we'll get timestamps in every episode.
We'll figure out a system eventually where this will be smooth, and hopefully we'll have it for every episode moving forward. There will be some hiccups in between, though, I guarantee you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I will forget. Okay. Here's my next topic. This is one I brought up to you, Vasili, and this is something like, again, I listen to all podcasts. I enjoy listening to all podcasts, even if I don't agree with you. I just need it. This is something I've done my whole life, so I can't like stop at this point. But there is a concept that I'm hearing that I keep hearing, and we'll get into like the interview portions with Briere, but just the one question that I feel like keeps coming up, and it comes up for Keith Jones and Briere, and it's like, oh, they have to keep commenting on the fact that this is not old school hockey. We're not just focusing on tough guys and physical size and but we know that the game has evolved. And my thing is like, why are they even justifying this? Like I get why they feel maybe they have to say it, but like, why are they being asked this? Like, this is a team that drafted Cam York at 14 and then go and draft Bobby Brink, who's 5'8". You got a guy who's 5'8" and a guy who's 5'10", 5'11", maybe on a fake number. It's like not big dudes, one of which is a defenseman. They draft Emile Andre at 5'8". Like, this is not a team that they drafted Joel Farabee. They drafted Morgan Frost. Like, what are you guys talking about? Like, why do they even have to talk about it? What evidence do we have that this team has not moved forward with the times? I don't get it. All the defenders. This is the team that drafted Shane Gostisbehere. This is the team that brought in Carter Hart. They found your goalies. Like, why are they justifying it? Like, oh, we actually get what's going on, that the game has evolved. Yeah, that game has evolved 20 years ago. Like, is it just me? Because we talked about this off camera, but like, I feel like people are reverting back to 20 years ago. That's what it feels like to me.
I think it's a question that gets brought up for a couple of reasons. The first being kind of the senior advisors and what was happening there and all the rumors surrounding them. I think like last season, the vision or what was kind of reported by a lot of media is that, oh, Flyers want to get tougher and they want to get physical and harder to play against and all that. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean physical ads, but I think in the past you see them get a Rasmus Ristolainen in here, a Nick Delorier, and then you have fans kind of thinking, okay, like what direction is the team going in? But like that's only a couple positions on the team that people have to remember, right? Like there's still physicality in the NHL. Look at the last two teams, like the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights. There's a ton of physical players on those teams. There's a ton of skilled players on those teams.
Four teams.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like there's a mixture of how the teams are built. It's not just pure skill. It's not just smaller forwards. It's all just kind of a mixture and combination.
There's no one recipe.
Exactly. Well, you need your shield guys, but you also need guys that can grind for you and be tough players to play against as well, and be hard in board battles and things like that. So like it's all kind of a mixture of it all and what works together, right? Like it's what works versus like, okay, no, this is what we have to kind of replicate. So
Radko Gudas is a one-dimensional defenseman. He has a decent breakout pass. He's good in his zone. He's a really good bottom pairing.
But you
defender.
Need that in the playoffs.
He's a tree stump. He's not tall, but he's not fast. He's not agile. Yeah. Like none of that is true. So like again, the physicality is huge in hockey. I don't understand when podcasts are saying, "Oh, this is not that league." It is that league. It 100% is that league. That's like telling me football, you don't have to be big and strong anymore because they're faster today. That's nonsense. If anything, they're bigger and stronger today.
Yeah.
And faster. And
I would
more
say
talented.
Exactly. It's all of it combined, right? Like
it's just ramped up. That's what happened.
Pretty much
ramped up.
I would say like
the rules have changed.
The NHL now, obviously, versus of the past, you have a lot more open ice, a lot more ability to control the puck. Is there still board battles that are crucial where you're going to have to be tough on your stick and, you're going to need big bodies to help you win that? 100%, right? Like
you can't win without it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. I think that's pretty much why the question gets brought up, just like the reporting kind of surrounding like the Flyers' vision and what they were kind of going towards. But when you really look at it and like look at, okay, where are they going towards in the future? It's all the guys that, they're drafting and the types of players that they're looking there, because that's who they're going to build around in the next 5-10 years. So when you look at it from that way and how you kind of brought it up, it's easy to see that they're going for scale. They're usually going for, okay, who's the best player that we can get here?
Samu Tuamala.
Yeah, right. They're going for a lot of skilled guys, and like I said, the physical pieces is usually something that you kind of add in after. You can still draft for that,
In the
obviously.
middle rounds, which they
Yeah,
have and hit successes. Noah Cates being
middle
one.
rounds, yeah, but also I mean like a lot of those like successful teams who are kind of in that bottom or not bottom four, but top four in the playoffs there, like they're adding those pieces later on through free agency, stuff like that,
Yes,
right? So that's like
for sure.
that's a typical thing. Like it's all a process of building. You're gonna draft your guys and then you're gonna build out from there based on what you don't have. And I
Right.
think the Flyers do a good job of kind of, like you said, going for the skill in the higher rounds and then filling out the roster in the middle rounds. That's what
Yeah.
most teams are looking to do, but you can't
What's
say that,
Tyson?
oh, like the Flyers are drafting like,
Big tough
guys
guys.
that are
Where are the
in the
evidence?
first round. Yeah, it's
Even
not
Cutter
happening.
Gauthier, I just said he's not a mean player. He's not like
Yeah.
even this guy Ryan Leonard, who the Flyers could take this
I
year,
mean,
is a nastier player than
the
Gauthier.
last first round pick you could go back to and say where the Flyers might have fucked up and took a guy probably higher than maybe where he should have been picked and was more of a physical type pick is Sam Moran, right? Like you look
How
at that,
long
and
ago was
that's
that?
at 2012. That's what I mean. It's like almost 11 years ago. So like it's just nonsense, really. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. And again, if you look back at that draft, it was pretty weak.
Yeah.
And Sam Moran is a player who lost his career because of injuries. He would have been an NHL defenseman, the very least a bottom pairing defenseman.
I think he would have been a bottom pair guy. Yeah. I actually
100%.
liked his game in that role. So.
Dude, he was so difficult. When he was really developing, he was one of the hardest players to play against in front of the net.
In front of the net and on the PK with his reach, man.
Body didn't hold up, unfortunately, for big Sammy Moran.
He's still with the org though, so like kudos to him there.
Great person.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So yeah, again, it's just one of those things where I'm like, I'm hearing it everywhere, and just seems like made up nonsense to me. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our next topic. This one is just going to be a series of rumors. We'll start with the Briere rumor mill. This one, I guess, was sparked by Briere going on to WIP, had an interview, and obviously was asked, and I want to bring this point up, he was asked specifically if Carter Hart was available for trade, and then he says the generic answer of, I have to explore all options. The first thing I will say to people is, why do they ask, is Carter Hart available for trade? Why don't they ask, are you considering moving a goalie? The reason is because they're trying to make a news story.
Yeah, so get clicks.
So you pick the player that you know will do it, and then you ask specifically about that, and the guy gives you the generic answer.
I mean, they're smart.
Which is the true answer. Yeah. Because look, if I get offered the second overall pick in this draft for Carter Hart, am I going to turn that down? Probably not. If I can get Adam Fantilli for Carter Hart, that's something I have to take seriously.
It's entertain that, exactly.
100%. If I'm getting offered random shit, probably not.
And that's probably what the offer more likely consists of than not, is random shit that other teams aren't gonna want. I mean, you look at goalie trades typically, and a lot of the time, kind of, especially in the last couple of years, it's hard to get value for a goalie.
2 second-round picks usually.
Yeah, it's very hard to get value for a goalie unless he's a bona fide. You can point to him and say, okay, this is a bona fide top 10 goalie in the league, which I believe Carter Hart is. The thing that
he doesn't have it on paper.
Exactly. The thing that hurts the Flyers here and is why I suggest they don't trade him is because you're going to look at the stats and that other team is going to say, well, the potential's there, but he hasn't done it yet, right? But the Flyers kind of know, well, he's done it for us in the playoffs when they made it in the bubble, right? Like he carried them in that Montreal season. He got to the 7 games basically in the Islanders series when they were getting outplayed a bit. Like he can do it when it matters, and he's carried the Flyers and won games for them at critical points. You see that last season, tons of games there where they probably had no business being in, and they end up either being wins or OT losses because of Carter Hart. So yeah. I think the stats aren't there, but you're gonna have a team point and say, okay, well, because of that, we won't know
how good he is.
100%, and they'll try to fleece you because they'll say, well, because those stats aren't there, well, we can't give you that premium package. And then if I'm the Flyers at that point, I kind of tune out and say,
great.
well,
then we had nothing to talk about.
Exactly. But if you're Briere, you not listening is kind of malpractice as
Ridiculous.
the GM, because who knows what they're going to offer you, right? It could be potentially anything. So you just hanging up every time you hear Carter Hart mentioned, is kind of ridiculous. And in terms of WIP bringing it up, I don't blame them. It's going to be a
It's
newsworthy
not just them.
story.
It's
Yeah,
everybody's doing the exact
exactly.
same thing.
Yeah, it's going to be a news worthy story, and the thing is, right, like the way they bring it up too, it kind of gets clipped and pulled around like, oh, we're going to listen to things on him. But the full quote is, now I'm not in a position to turn down anything. If there's teams calling about him, we have to listen. That's my job as a general manager. I have to listen. I have to do what is best for the team and the organization. In saying that, I expect Carter Hart to be our goalie for many years to come. He also cited the strength of the pool, mentioning Ursun, Sandstrom, and the Russian goalies in Kolosov, Fedotov as well. But like he's basically saying, yeah, sure, if I get an insane deal, I will take the deal if it makes a lot of sense. But unless it meets those insane terms that we're going to have for a player of that value and who's still so young, and typically goalies don't even come into the league until they're his age of 24, like, no way, man. Like you said, unless it's like a crazy type trade, I can't see them giving him up, right? Unless you're getting like a first line player back who's like a 40, 50 goal scorer or like a top pick, right? So
there's not much interest, and again, everybody's approaching it from a position of fear of what if he leaves? What if? Okay, but you can't approach shit like that. You have to assume that you'll get the job done. It's like everybody has this attitude that we're like woken.
And if you think about it too, sorry to cut you off, Yariv, there's no, like, if you look at Carter Hart right now and just like his leverage for his next contract, he doesn't have much technically. If you look at the stats, like, and everything and the wins, he's obviously going to cite that, okay, the team's been bad, that's held me back, but the team's going to say, well, you could have performed better. Like, the leverage isn't there. So
it would just be an even conversation. We want you here, and here's their fair price, and this is what you deserve. But if you look at your comparables around the league, then you can argue about potential or blah blah blah.
Yeah, exactly. From a Flyers perspective, though, I don't think they're in a bad position to re-sign Hart in the future once it comes to that point. And I think unless the player explicitly makes it clear he's not interested in coming back, you'd be crazy to move on from him and move on from a franchise goalie, something you've been searching for 2 decades at this point. So
yeah, absolutely. And again, just shout out to Broad Street Hockey. Also, they had a good interview with Briere as well, and he again, they asked him the same question, and he like laughed it off, and he's just like, guys, like I'm trying to give you the most political answer I can. I'm open to conversation, but I see Carter Hart as the goalie of the future.
It's basically a no, but he's just saying anything could happen, right?
Well, again, you have to ask yourself, guys, seriously, you're taking over this job. You're looking at the assets that you have. You're a neutral party, not an angry fan. You're not going to look at your starting goaltender who's 24, exceeded expectations.
Yeah, we got to move him.
That's the first one that's got to go.
It just doesn't make any sense from like
he would be at the bottom of the list. That's what I'm saying, not the top.
From a team building perspective, it really makes no sense, especially for a front office who's been citing in like every interview that, oh, the way we want to build this team is from the back end. Like the first piece of that is your goalie. So
I'll be honest with you, there's a higher chance, and I don't think either one of them are being moved, but there's a higher chance that Scott Lawton gets traded over Carter Hart.
I agree. Yeah.
People are enamored with Scott Lawton because he had an A on his chest. I love Lawton. I want him here. But if you get offered a first and a second for him, which is probably his value to a playoff team, to be honest with you, maybe even 2 firsts, like, because he could be that missing piece that they think they need, But if he can get you a first and a second, that's a guy you have to consider moving. He's close to 30. Like, he might not be here when they're good. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or I don't buy that either.
Or he may not be the same player he was, right?
Yeah. Though personally, I don't think Vasili and I are saying that. I think Vasili and I, if we had to bet, right, I bet at 31, 32, Scott Lawton's going to be a pretty good player. He's probably going to be a pretty good third line player in the NHL. He's not a good player because he's the fastest or the most skilled. He's a smart, physical player.
Works hard.
He's got that Mike Richards-esque game without the
much scoring potential,
supposed pill and alcohol problem, which I don't really fully buy either. I think more his body broke down as well. Anyway, that's a separate issue. So anything else you want to say about the Briere thing? I think it's enough. enjoy rumors. While again, this is why I hate rumors.
I just don't think
never
it's
know.
something that we can really expect to actually happen. So
Yeah.
don't be too surprised when Carter Hart's still the starting goalie next season.
Yeah, expect simpler, especially in the immediate. If it's gonna be a big splash, it's probably not happening this summer unless it's an older player. I would imagine. I hear the Provorov stuff. We'll talk about that in a second, but I just don't buy that one. So I guess real quick before we get to Provorov, we have our next one here. And this is Darren Drager confirms that Montreal would match any Caulfield offer sheet. Now, again, that has been thrown out there. The Flyers are going to offer sheet Caulfield. Again, a rumor that is slim to none.
Yeah.
But if you just want to further eliminate it from you, they're also not going to let the player go.
Who's under the control for so many more seasons is such a young, dynamic player. It only makes sense.
It's just not going to happen. I mean, let's just be honest. It's just fantasy nonsense. The only time it happened is with a player who isn't that great, quite frankly. It's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's highly, highly unlikely and probably not where you should put your focus.
Yeah, Dreger, just for context, said literally this on TSN 690 in Montreal. If anyone is foolish enough to offer Cole Caulfield, Montreal would match. It's flat out simple. They would match, and I haven't heard from one other team that there's even a veiled threat of that. So there's literally teams know if you offer it, we're matching, so don't even think about it.
And yet somehow that journalist from Montreal knows what Danny Briere is thinking. And this is my point. It's like, how do people read this stuff and go, oh yeah, I accept that, instead of just being like, dude, you have no inside source here, and whatever you heard is probably wrong anyway. So yeah, again, what kind of guy reveals his moves as soon as he gets here? I don't get. It
doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of let's make a concrete plan and execute it, and
Keith Jones just got hired, and they're already ready to go. They're trading Carter Hart. Provorov's leaving town. Hayes is out the door. We're moving everybody. We're gonna free up $30 million in cap space overnight.
Don't see it,
and the team will be worse, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all. All that matters is that you make trades. Okay. Let's move on to our next one. So this is the Provorov one. So shout out again to DeMarco on this one. Anthony DeMarco. Team's calling it on Provorov. Again, they're kicking the tires. We've heard this before. The comparables are Chychrun and Ekholm. Again, I think the comparables are Lindholm. We mentioned it here on the podcast last week. See how I can make that stuff up too. Sorry, Anthony DeMarco. Not that he made that up, but you see how you can just find different values. You don't have to just narrow it down to Chychrun and Ekholm. There are so many additional comments you can make to every single thing said that you realize that most stuff is just talking.
It's hearsay, right? And I mean, there's sources that mentioning, okay, if we get something around this value, we're going to be interested and we're going to talk it out and see if it makes sense, right? But it doesn't mean that they're going to get that exactly.
Let me ask you this, Vasili, because I am not... I feel like I might end up looking stupid on this one. I don't see Provorov getting traded. Every other rumor is saying that he is. People are confident, like Anthony Sanfilippo, again, who's gotten a lot right, as far as the trade rumors, stuff like that. He does have sources. For those who are not aware, he worked for the team, so this is a guy who clearly has sources within I don't know to what degree. I don't know the guy personally, but he's saying Provorov is guaranteed to move. Again, the only way is if that Provorov wants out. I could see it, but I don't know. Do you think I'm being biased there? I'm just he's not on the top of my list to move if I really look at this team objectively.
Well, I just think in terms of the Provorov stuff, right? It all depends on him and kind of what he is looking for. And we said it before, if he is, saying, okay, if you can move me, please move me, I'd rather get moved, then the Flyers are going to try to accommodate that, because you're not going to want a player. You're not going to want a player on your team that does not want to be there.
It'll get
worse. You also have to, exactly. But you also have to look at it from this perspective. And I mean, he's a valuable defenseman. So if you're the Flyers and you're going to move him, you better.
They're most valuable defenseman.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just saying, for the Flyers, he's the most valuable. I'm just saying across the league, he's a valuable defenseman and teams would want him. So if you're going to move him, you better damn well make sure that you get, a good enough package back, because you got to understand, you're losing a 25-minute defenseman that plays against all the best top lines for you. Has been a help to Cam York and development of his game. Like, removing him from the roster will be a detriment in a lot of different facets. So you got to understand it from that perspective. They don't have somebody that can jump into that role. What does that do for the team? Kind of their progression next year, because they want to keep taking steps forward if possible, right? Like, it's an iterative process, and we've heard that they want to build on last season. So if you remove a guy like that, does that help you do that? I don't know, right? So, like, if you look at it, I think if the Flyers get like a deal, if he's out there and the Flyers get a deal that is fair value and it makes sense, I think that they'll probably pull the trigger. But I think it has to actually meet the value they want. And personally, if you look at his stats the last couple of seasons, it's been a little underwhelming compared to where he's been before in his career. I think teams, it's the same thing with the Carter Hart thing. They're going to try to fuck the Flyers on these trades, basically. And I mean, if you're the Flyers, you got to be wary, because you're potentially letting go a guy that could blossom back into what you saw before, playing on a much better team with a much better partner. And the Flyers haven't given him that or the chance to do that again here. So I think he could get back to that here as well. Just, looking at the Chychrun and Ekholm trades here kind of as comparables, I think the Flyers and what they're doing, it does make sense. Like, if they got this kind of return back, if they were going to trade him, like for Chychrun, Ottawa traded a first-round pick in the 2023 NHL draft, conditional second-round pick, and a second-round pick in 2026. I personally think the Flyers would probably look to get maybe prospects instead of those extra picks back. Like we said last week, you get your, let's say, first in the top 10 for Provorov, and then you get a prospect who like is a defensive prospect that's your replacement for him. Then you get like a second round pick. That's a pretty fair trade. And then for Ekholm, I mean, the
Oilers 10 this year or top 10 next year?
Top 10 this year.
Top 10 this year, I think would be hard to get all of that.
It might be hard. Top 10 this year,
and a second.
Yeah. Then or next year.
Yes.
I just feel like it's hard because you don't know who's going to be in the top 10 yet next year. So like it's hard to kind of.
But that's why I say that, right? Because you have a guarantee. You know who's good already. You probably have somebody in mind. That team.
I feel like if it's a top 10 pick though for Provorov, like it's not going to be in the top 5 like range, or it's not, it's not going to be even in the 5 to 8 range. Like I think it would be either like 9, 10, or maybe 8. So like the Flyers get like to pick 7th and 8th, and then they get two guys they really like, or they get like the 10th pick, right? But like just to finish, sorry, Yariv, and I'll let you go there. Okay. But the Ekholm trade was Tyson Barrie, a prospect, Reed Schaefer, 2023 first round pick, 2024 fourth round pick. So like something like that. Let's say you got back for Provorov, like a pretty good defenseman back, a prospect who's also I was a second round pick, and then a first and a fourth. Like that's pretty fair value. So I think if the Flyers get something like that, it'd be hard to not say yes, especially if the player is actually like saying, okay, like I don't mind to play for the team, but if it was my preference, I'd like to change the scenery. Then I think they'll go ahead with it, right?
Yeah, and I think an example of what you're talking about is the Detroit Red Wings, right? They're a team that's looking to improve. They have a bunch of picks in their system.
A lot of prospects.
I don't know their prospect pool well enough, but I'm sure they have a young defenseman in there that's, they're probably not at the NHL level, like number 8 pick, young defenseman, something like that. I think
second rounder
possible. Maybe the Flyers add a piece to go the other way, give them a pick in return. Maybe it is a second round pick or something. You know what I mean? I don't know exactly what it would be, but I think something like that, where it's a bubble team looking to take another step, adding a guy like Provorov into their top 4, their top pairing.
Imagine Provorov and Sider. What kind of pairing that would be?
And again, this is a team that has a history of having Russians and Russians excelling in their organization, especially foreign defensemen. I don't want to, again, this is why I don't really want to trade Provorov. It's not on top of my list. Somebody like Sanheim is more in that vicinity.
I just think it doesn't make sense, because he's basically, at this point, he's your best defenseman. He's helped some of your young guys along. You see how good Cam York played with him. So wouldn't you want to kind of expand on that and see what it could be? And I don't think the Flyers are, like I said, I think their window's about 2 years. Like this year, they might not make the playoffs, but they'll be close. And then the next season is really going to be like when they're back in the mix. Kind of, they're looking to. I would agree. They're looking to add maybe next offseason. So like, I don't think it's so far away where you can't sell the Provorov. Like, hey, like even if you want, like he's a competitive guy. Let's not get it wrong here. And I don't blame you as a professional athlete entering the prime of his career, which he is, where he's saying, I want to win now. I don't want to be a part of a rebuild. I
Yeah,
could
and he's
see,
labeled as he hears
yeah,
what the stuff said about him
but
here.
also he's probably saying like, you know what? It's not even about the shit and the noise around me. It's more about like I want to win. I want to be on a contender. So if it's a
You're right.
team that's saying, okay, we're not going to be good for the next 5 years, he's probably saying, well, that's my whole prime, so I'm out of here. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
this is my best chance to win is now when I'm
it's
at the
possible.
best point of my career. So, but
100%
I
possible.
don't think the Flyers are in that period. Like I said, it's going to be like, okay, this year close to the bubble, but you still probably don't make it in, and then next year you're kind of looking to make it back. So I think they can sell that to Provorov and say, hey, like it's not as long as you think it might be, and we'd like you to stick around because we think you could be a real valuable piece for us when we do turn this thing around. And the Flyers, they mentioned specifically that they don't feel they're in a position where they have to trade him and are comfortable hanging on to Provorov should they not get a fair offer, right? So that's
It
what
doesn't
DeMarco's
it
reporting.
feel exactly
Yeah,
like the harder hard thing where you're
yeah,
just asking about a specific. You're not going, are you going to try to move one of the defensemen? You're going, are you going to trade Provorov?
yeah, exactly.
You are putting, and this is, I see this all the time. You're putting your narrative into the question. Instead of asking an open ended question, you are positioning the person to only talk about one person.
Yeah.
It's
I,
done in all throughout media, not just sports.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to generate
Paint a
interest,
narrative.
obviously, and it makes sense. One other thing to mention that Anthony kind of brings up in his article is St. Louis Blues are among the teams who've kicked the tires on Provorov. I'm sure
Makes
there's a
sense.
bunch. I'm sure there's a bunch of teams who have,
Mhm.
and I mean, even think about it. They're a team that's trying to kind of,
Toronto,
yeah, they're a team though. St. Louis is kind of
Edmonton.
trying to reinvent themselves as well, a bit, right? So I think there's going to be interest in him for sure because his name's probably been out there as we hear from all these rumors that dating back months ago. So like obviously teams know that there must be some sort of smoke or some sort of unhappiness. That's something that sparks this. But just because a player is unhappy at a certain point doesn't mean like that's a definitive thing. He might like the new direction. He might like the new
Right.
GM. Who knows the conversations
Might
that
like
they've had?
Jones.
Exactly. You don't know the conversations
Jones
that have
might
been.
like him.
You don't either way, but you don't know the conversations that have been had behind closed doors here, right? So like, it's hard to kind of pinpoint and say, oh well, based on a couple months ago what we heard, we know that he's getting traded and all this. Like things change rapidly, so like I just think that it's a name that's been out there for a while, so you're going to continue to hear it. But if the Flyers don't get, I would say that if you see a Provorov trade, it's because the Flyers got a very good return back for him.
Well, and that's why I say, look, I don't want him traded. If they trade him and the return is good, at the very least, the way the Giroux trade turned out, where we got a legit guy to get excited about and a first round pick to compensate if he doesn't
That's a
work
great
out.
trade. Yeah.
Like, at least we can walk away with something where, okay, this makes sense for what we're doing. Okay.
Yeah, and
I
then you can
get it.
say, okay, we are technically, trying to get the team younger. He's still a young guy, but technically you did get younger still by making the trade. So
Yeah. And look, again, I'm not saying it's automatically a bad move. I make that very clear. But you have to win that trade. Again, no more losing trades. No trading Provorov for a second round pick. Like you're
yeah,
not in that position to do that. That's not good. So again, smart trades. Look at what we paid for other defensemen. And let's get into the next one actually, because this is again, shout out to DeMarco. The Flyers may explore ways to move Dan. Again, when he says this, I think this is somewhat his opinion, maybe conversations he's having with people internally. And that the expected buyout for him would be 1.66 million over 2 years.
shout out to Jamie on that because that's his stat.
Oh, thank you. Perfect. So again, yeah, if you do that, a potential buyout, again, I don't see that happening. I'd say it's possible. But again, I think he's top of the list to get traded out of
Yeah,
town.
I think they will.
And that's a guy you take like a second for.
Yeah, I think they're definitely going to try to move him as much as they can, just because of the salary he makes. You free up some salary, and I mean, the team's kind of looking to have some younger defensemen make graduate to the NHL, like Attard, Zamula, Andre potentially. So you do have to make room for some of these guys. Like you don't want to bring them up and have them, only playing like minimal minutes or sitting on the bench,
Well, you already
being
have
healthy
Justin
scratched.
Braun, who's retired, right? So you
Yeah,
by default, you got the one spot open already. I don't know if NHL teams, I'll be honest with you, it might sound the way to fans. NHL teams don't love having a bunch of question marks
yep.
going into a season of who's going to play where and what. So maybe they open up one more position, but I think The fact that they don't have their 6 and 7 spots, or I guess you can say 5 and 6, depending on where you want to see Sealer nailed down for next year. I don't know if they're going to do too much more beyond that. I think one guy
on defense could get moved. Yeah.
And that's a huge opening. Like, that's what people don't understand. Braun's already gone. Here's another guy who potentially is leaving. Could be a Tony DeAngelo guy.
Basically, I need a number 5. Left. Basically, a guy who's a number 5, essentially.
Right. And like that you can risk, but like putting a young guy at number 1 where Provorov is, again, you're immediately either handing that to Sanheim
or York, even.
Yeah, you're doing Sanheim Risto as your top pairing next year.
But isn't that kind of the thing that we kind of wanted to avoid? Like, the whole thing was Provorov
that's my point.
Development was like, putting him into such responsibility so quick stunted him. Like, wouldn't you be doing the exact same thing if you trade these older guys? So it's I don't know. The logic doesn't make a lot of sense all around the circle, but
you move the one that doesn't fit your group, which is Tony DeAngelo, who's on a 1-year deal. Why would you try to move the guy you never benched?
And then, I mean, realistically, is DeAngelo making $5 million? I think so, right?
Yeah.
So if he's making $5 million, Provorov's making what? Is it 6.7? Like, you're really only losing 1.7 of savings. Like, it's pretty minimal.
And you keep the better defenseman that your coach wants to play every game rather than the guy
literally.
He benched. Like, what, 8 games this year? Again, even if you don't, people want the return for Provorov to speed up the process. The problem is these draft pick returns, they're no guarantee. That's why if the trade is for a 21-year-old defenseman who's in the AHL and was a former high first-round pick, mid-first-round pick guy, then you get a first-round or a second-round pick to compensate. That's a conversation I would entertain for Provorov. I don't know that name, but I'm just throwing out a David Juracek, right? That's probably not going to happen, but I'm just throwing out a name.
But it makes sense then, because you have a replacement, and the other team's like, okay, we need this guy now. We can't wait. So.
Yeah, and even in the maybe Juracek for Provorov straight up. Again, not going to happen.
Columbus
has zero reason to do this trade, but I'm just trying to use it as an example of value of what the Flyers would look to do. It's just like anything about that, it's a loss. And again, you only take the loss if the player's like, yo, I'm going to leave you guys next year. Yeah. But again, you would do that in the trade deadline when you can get even higher
value.
For a team that's desperate for him.
I don't think it's a rush. And like I said, it's not like he had the best season last season where you're like, okay, he hit the highest value we want to trade him at. So like,
if he did that, he wouldn't even be conversation for trading him.
Yeah, and realistically, if let's say he does want to leave, and you do have to move him at the deadline, like you said, like he has a whole half season to even make his value rise even more with better play, right? So if you're the Flyers, it just doesn't make a lot of sense overall. I mean, what we will do for the next topic here, it's also Provorov related, but there was a rumor.
Go ahead.
There was a rumor kind of pulled out by Andy and Rono on Twitter. It wasn't a rumor specifically reported by them, but it's kind of been going around in the circles that San Jose may be open to trading their 4th overall pick. So they kind of put out a trade scenario of Provorov, Urson, and the 7th overall for straight up the 4th overall pick. And as you can hear Yariv's reaction,
sorry,
it's not a very good trade. I just thought it was something interesting to mention. I thought it was a pretty funny scenario. Like, personally, if the Flyers trade Provorov, Urson, the 7th overall just for the 4th pick, that would be a terrible trade.
Terrible trade, and
it's not something the Flyers.
And it also doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's not something the Flyers should even entertain. Like, personally, if you were trading Provorov, you should get like straight up just for the 4th overall pick.
Yeah,
like, maybe the value's there, but you add in a guy that looks like he could be a potential starter, plus the 7th overall as well. Like, I don't know, man. That's just way too much.
No, you're giving up 3 assets. You could. It doesn't make sense
for one that isn't even a guarantee. Like, it's different. It's different if it's like the top 2. You're giving up a ton to get into the top 2. I get that. Okay, that's
4 is pretty big deal, but you're moving up 3 spots. And
that's what I mean. It's not like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. It also doesn't make sense for San Jose. Like, are they looking for a Provorov? Maybe they're looking for an Ersan. But like,
the deal makes no sense because they have $11 million tied up in Karlsson already.
Yeah. You're also assuming that the guy at number 7 is much worse than the guy at number 4. And
which
I can tell you
this is the case in this draft.
This is what I'm saying. I don't buy that at all. all you have to do is follow these drafts every year to know that the narrative around them shifts for no goddamn reason.
Yeah, like I do agree. Like
none.
I feel like the talent gap between 4 and 7 is minimal. The talent gap between 1 and 2 to 7 very high. So like
Yes.
if you were going into the top 2 and you're giving up a package like that, you probably have to give up even more in a scenario to get into the top 2. But like then you're like, okay, I get it, because typically it's hard to trade up into the top 2 picks in a draft. Usually you very rarely ever see it done. So you're gonna have to give up a fucking ton of shit to do it, right?
Yeah, for the top 2 this year, absolutely. Because again, you're guaranteeing yourself at an NHL
Generational talent potentially.
And maybe people make that case with number 4 because you could take Michkov or Carlson or Will Smith. But again, why wouldn't the Flyers just take their odds there?
Whoever doesn't get picked
spots.
And be like, hey, yeah, whoever doesn't get picked is a pretty good alternative here. So,
and again, you're losing your top defenseman, you're losing your backup goaltender, potential starter in the NHL. It's like, it doesn't make sense on paper.
It was an interesting rumor to bring up. I just thought it was really funny, kind of laughable almost. I just thought we'd bring up all this Provorov stuff. I'm like, that's definitely a trade that if they made for Provorov, I'd be like, okay, why? What's the reasoning?
The trade I could see the Flyers at the trade deadline is moving Kevin Hayes, or at the draft is moving Kevin Hayes, probably for either a late first round pick or a second round pick, or potentially just a young guy in the organization. And the Flyer, like, I don't think his cap hit is that hard to move. I think they'd have to eat some of it, but not that much of it. That's one I could see.
Or maybe a first next season, like a late first, like from a contender.
I want to make it very clear, even though we say the odds are, I never thought when I was, and again, I was a lot younger, but I didn't think that Jeff Carter and Mike Richards were going to get traded on the same day.
Yeah, okay? So anything can happen.
If you would have asked me, I'd be like, no, that's crazy.
You're fucking
Why would
nuts.
They do that?
Yeah,
they only need one of them, right? There are stuff, and that's why I say about the Provorov thing. If Provorov doesn't want to be here, then he's leaving town. Like, let's be honest. Like, nobody's
with any player though, typically, right? Like, if you're a team, why would you want anybody on the team that doesn't want to be on the team? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. So that's why I'm open to Provorov. You hear it enough, but I don't know. I just don't think it makes too much sense. It's just not what I would look to do. Let's put it that way. If I put my GM on hat, these are not moves that are at the top of my list. Again, I am trying to move other players and give those secondary roles to young guys, right? Like those more support roles to young guys. Like Kevin Hayes at third line, center or winger is not that valuable to me because I can put a young guy there. If he was playing top line on my team, it's a very different story. Then I can have a good top line, right? And then trickle in the young guys below. That's what it's really about. It's not about putting it all on the young guys. It's not that doesn't work. We've seen what that does to player development. You need good veterans, guys like Sean Couturier.
Unless it's like a Connor McDavid or a generational guy, or you can't put that pressure on them.
Sure. And when we draft him, I'm sure we'll put him on the top line. Like, so I said about Cutter Gauthier, I don't see him playing in the AHL at all. I don't think it's going to be a Tyson Forrester situation. I think it's going to be Cutter Gauthier comes into the NHL at 19, 20 years old. I mean, it's probably 20 years old. Will be playing in the NHL, probably on the third line spot. Again, you're not going to just toss him immediately on top line. Maybe you'll test him. You'll play him there from time to time, but his game will most likely fluctuate up and down. He's not a first overall pick. So it's like, you don't want to go in with
typically
just young guys
running a rise to that spot, and your young guys rise there versus let's just hand you the keys and see what happens.
There is a certain point to just remove those veterans though. When you see example for New Jersey, you see a guy like Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier, and you see those guys really taking over the team and the ownership and the leadership of that team. Then all of a sudden and they're not in that position, but if you had other veterans, right, you start maybe removing some of them. But
they traded a Kyle Palmieri a couple years back. Like they didn't have to trade him,
right?
Like stuff like that, right?
But you look, they brought in Andre Palat, right? They didn't just go, oh, we're young and fast, we're good.Ey're like, no, we need.
Let's get a 2-time Stanley Cup winner
with playoff experience, which I guarantee you, New Jersey will look to do that this offseason. Try to find a physical. Probably a more physical type of player.
I mean, most teams are trying to do that, right? Like they're trying to supplement
because they have the talent, the skill they have.
most teams are even trying to do that. They're trying to supplement their young high end talent with, veterans that have been in the NHL playoffs before, have experience that can kind of supplement them and be their depth and
We
be
saw
also,
Toronto do that a
yeah,
lot.
be also somebody that like the young guys can lean on for support because they've kind of been through that stuff, right? Because it could be hard in a first time experience in the playoffs. So
Yeah,
definitely
100%,
how it
dude.
goes.
All right, let's get into our next topic. Let's talk about prospects.
Yes.
So obviously the draft is still a little bit away. We are approaching that date though, ever so slowly. I think we're
We're
about
gearing
3
up,
weeks
everyone.
away. So we still got time, but it is a very exciting time. So just going off the comment here, and this is Vasili's topic, so I'll let you comment on it first. But asking Briere, the question was brought up: does he expect Michkov to be at 7? If he's the best player available, he doesn't expect him to make it down there. I don't expect him to
I don't
make it down
either.
there.
Yeah.
But I would say with that answer, I do kind of suspect, like, hey, if he's there, how do we pass him? Like, they're
Yeah.
not, again, this is a first overall pick talent. It's not
Yeah.
a guy who's, maybe a top line player in the league. This is
Yeah.
maybe a generational player in the league.
Like we said, right, a couple of years back, there was comparisons between Mishkov and Bedard, and I think the fact that he hasn't gotten to play in the World Junior Championships and this whole kind of political thing has really hurt his
Or
stock.
IIHF,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
no
Because
Russia team,
he would have been in this tournament if he could have played, most likely.
and
And if
probably
Russ,
led it in goals.
yeah, most likely, right? So that's the thing, right? You kind of look at it and you think about okay, if Michkov, a player with that much talent, is there, how could you pass, right? And I think the question Jason Martinez asks Briere kind of gives his hand a little bit into what would happen if he did fall. Because he says, I don't expect him to fall. I'm sure all these teams that are in, this kind of top 10 are discussing, okay, like, who's your guy? Like the teams want to know, right? Because they want to be able to kind of project. So I'm sure there's been lots of conversations regarding that. But I think Briere gives it away a little bit. Like if they're going to take the best player available, they don't want to really draft for need, especially in the top 10. He kind of hinted at that. So if Bichkov's there and at 7, he would definitely be the best player available. I don't think there's a doubt that the Flyers would select him. And I don't think he will drop there. But if he does, man, like that's great luck for the Flyers, obviously.
You know what that makes me think of? I actually just watched a really good movie called Tetris.
Okay.
For those who are not, are you aware of the movie?
Yes, I am.
Did you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So those who are not aware, it's about the story about bringing Tetris over from the USSR as it was collapsing. And those who are not aware, Tetris was like, it was like Pong, and then Tetris came out, and that was like the first video game that became like a humongous sensation.
Yeah.
Everybody owned it. It blew everybody's mind. There was nothing like this at the time. And this movie is really fascinating because it's about an American going over there and trying to work with Russians, and through the Japanese and Nintendo, but it's kind of like foreign deal making. And I can't help but feel like you get a guy like Michkov, you're going over to Russia
To make some sort of
like,
deals. Yeah.
guys, like that's what I'm trying to say. Like everybody's like, oh, like, what do I do? Who gives a fuck? You own his rights. Go get him.
Yeah.
Go. You are one of the wealthiest teams in the league. Apparently, if you guys don't know communism very well, you can bribe people in Russia. I'm just being honest with people. You can make deals. I don't know if you can pay out the rest of his contract. I don't know, but you are one of the wealthiest team. And if Michkov is what he is, you're going to work your ass
something
off
can be done.
to
Yeah.
get him over here. That's all I'm saying. That it's not like you draft him and then you sit back and go, oh, I really hope my lottery pick worked out. Like there are actions you can take. I don't know what they are. I have some guesses in my head that maybe are not legal because I never looked up any of this stuff. And I don't know if Putin would try to kill me. But you know what I mean? Like he's a player worth taking a risk on.
Worth the risk. Yeah, worth the swing.
And working to get him over here.
And it's like even
it does happen.
Yeah, and even if he doesn't come over for 1, 2, 3 years, like you're not in a position right now as the Flyers where you're going to be competitive anyway. So it's not like it really affects you much. Like you might as well take the potential generational talent and then reap the rewards later. Like look at Minnesota; they took Kirill Kaprizov. He didn't come over for 3 years. Do you think that they're mad that they didn't have him for 3 years versus not having him now and him scoring 90 points a year? Like I don't think they care, right?
how do you pick Ryan Leonard over Michkov? And I like Ryan Leonard,
You
but
can't.
like you can't because the talent difference and
It's too like the disparity is too large. You can't do it.
it's too large. Where like maybe Ryan Leonard is going to be a top line scorer in the league. He has that
But that if he
potential.
hits
But
his max ceiling potentially, right?
yes, and Michkov's bare minimum, from what we can tell, is like
It's
an
like a sec.
80 point player in the league.
Yeah,
At
exactly.
least offensively. I don't know how great defensively he's going to be, but nobody's worried
But
about
when you
that with
score a lot of
Bedard.
points like that, nobody seems
Yeah,
to care about
I
defense too
mean,
much.
McDavid's not great at defense yet, though. I suspect he will be fantastic at defense by the time he finishes his career.
Yeah, another thing to bring up, and I think just to kind of add to the Michkov conversation, I just want to bring more stats and more to light on like the Ovechkin comparisons
Sure.
to Michkov. So this is Michkov's draft season in the KHL. In 27 games in his draft season, he has 9 goals, 20 points, 8 even strength goals out of the 9. So not even on the power play time, which is very impressive in a men's league. He has 97 shots in 27 games as well. At the same exact age in Ovechkin's draft season, Ovechkin only had 3 more points than Michkov's 20 in 26 more games, just for reference. So it just kind of shows. I mean, the level of competition. The one thing that I saw is like, oh, what was the level of competition in the KHL back then versus now? I'm like, you know what? That's an argument you can make, but it's 26 more games. Like the KHL is still a really good league. It's probably, if it isn't the second best league
Ovechkin
in the world, it's
Ovechkin's also
probably the
much
third.
bigger than Michkov
Exactly.
physically.
Michkov's only 5'8", just for everybody's reference, and that's what he's listed at. So like, who really
We have no
fucking
idea
knows?
how big he
Yeah, who
is or how
really
much he's
knows?
grown because
And
nobody's probably allowed to see him.
nobody's even been able to see him. Another thing to add to this all is in SKA. So he only played 3 games for SKA this season, and then he was moved over to HC Sochi. But for SKA, he only averaged 3 minutes a game, a total of 9 minutes and 33 seconds over 3 games. In contrast, the rest of the games, so he played 27 games, so 3 with SKA, then the rest would be 24 with Sochi. He averaged 15 minutes, 51 seconds. So like, it's not like he's playing 20 minutes a night either. Like he's just okay, like a good 15 minutes. That's cool. And he's
Yeah.
still putting up like insane numbers against men in the KHL for his age. So
And
it
that
just
just doesn't
shows,
happen.
yeah, it doesn't. And it just shows like if you
They
have a
play
chance,
guys. They'll play guys like 3 minutes a night, first round
that's what
picks.
he was getting, yeah,
Yeah.
at SKA, and still he was putting up points as well. And then they're like, okay, let's move him somewhere else. But
Can we
um,
play him any less? How do we slow him down?
But yeah, like it just shows, right? The talent with Michkov's unreal. There was a video that got put out earlier this week by the Hockey News of him doing some drills and just like, showing his hands off and his skill. I encourage you to watch that video if you have not seen it. There's a little segment at the end where he's just like doing the Michigan willingly on a goalie. Literally takes the puck, puts it, bounces it up in front of the net, and then bats it out midair in and past the goalie. And you're kind of just like, this kid is fucking insane.
He's
I was
next
watching
level.
as
I
a
know.
goalie, like somebody who played net, and I'm like, I feel bad for this guy who's in net right now. His confidence is probably very low after this training
Yeah.
session. Like, but Mishkov's insane is basically the point of this all.
Yeah. Agreed. And I would be really excited if he ends up here. So I guess our next topic here, and you wrote this in here, so I'll let you lead this, but you had Will Smith noted here. Well, talking Will Smith, I'll let you lead what you want to refer to as Will Smith, because we could talk about him as, a potential option for the Flyers if he were to fall to 7. I think
Yeah.
Flyers would jump, hop, skip, and run to draft this
Yeah.
kid at 7.
I don't think I can't expect him to fall. Like I've seen in some drafts him
Right.
potentially going third.
Third,
A
yeah.
lot of mocks have him going fourth to San Jose. I mean, if Michkov goes in the top 4, though, someone has to fall. So we'll kind of see what happens because you'll have Bedard 1. I'm assuming Fantilli 2, and then you're gonna have Carlson, Michkov go 3 or 4. Then Smith could be 5, could be 6. Like who knows?
And then Dvorsky also has been
Dvorsky as
rumored to
well.
be high up.
Benson's in there.
Benson.
Dvorsky stock rose a lot. Like Grant McKegg, one of well-known scouts, he's in the Twitter community. Like he said, like a lot of NHL scouts he's talked to have Dvorsky in their top 5 just due to like his mature game. So like I would not be surprised if we see some off the board stuff that like a lot of people aren't expecting. The main deal with Will Smith I wanted to bring up just to kind of mention it because I saw this out there is every player with a higher U18 points per game in the NTDP than Will Smith. It's only Jack Hughes by like a
I
0.2
know.
or
I
something.
saw.
So it's
Same with
crazy.
Perot. Same with
Yeah,
Perot.
it's crazy that like Will Smith is literally better than almost every NTDP player ever than Jack Hughes in terms of a points perspective per game. So like, just shows like he could be going fourth, third, fifth, sixth,
He,
seventh,
I'll
and
be
he
honest
might
with you,
be
he's
one of the
exactly what we
best.
need, in my opinion.
Yeah, in terms of a center, he might be one of the best talents in this draft. Of his vision, I mean, we saw kind of Steve state that he might have the best vision in the draft after Bedard in terms of playmaking. So like
Yeah.
for him to mention that, that's obviously
I,
for a reason.
I
So
couldn't see him falling behind lower than sixth,
no,
unfortunately.
I think the Flyers might. I mean, in terms of their selection, it's going to be surrounding. I think Leonard, Dvorsky, guys, maybe Benson, guys of that ilk. I can't see Michkov or Smith falling to them, but I do think if one was going to fall, I think Michkov will be more likely than Smith to fall. That's
Yeah,
my
I think so
opinion.
too. I mean, you got a center
With
with
the Russian
size,
factor and all that.
a guy who probably would have been a number two pick most year.
Yeah,
That's why
literally.
I expect so many X factors. Because even a guy like Benson, like we're starting to pick these guys apart, but if you really look at them in a
In
normal
all other
draft year,
drafts,
they're
these guys are
all
like
top
top
three
three
pick.
picks. Yeah.
Yeah, like the fact Jonathan Drouin was taken top three. Like you remember that draft, Drouin, McKinnon, and what's his name, Seth Jones, right, and
Yeah.
Barkov,
Yeah.
right? Like that's so we're talking about like that, but three of that.
Yeah.
That's essentially what this draft is. It's like, you know how you have a normal top four? Okay, well, now you have three top fours. It's like the top 10 in this draft is all guys who are usually top three picks.
Yeah,
So
the depth is insane. Like
it's insane.
for teams like St. Louis, who have about I think three first round picks, and teams that have two first round picks, like that's great. Like, they're going to be able to
Well,
get potential first line top six guys. I mean,
if you,
the whole if you're the Flyers, I think your main goal is, try to get rid of some of your veterans potentially, and maybe pick up another like late to mid first round pick if you can. I think that'd be great if they
yeah,
could do that. If it's somebody that isn't of like a ton of value. Let's say you move like a Kevin Hayes and then you add your second round pick. Like let's say or add a couple thirds from this year and try to get into the first round for somebody else in the late stages there. I think that would be a solid move for them to
yeah,
kind of try to explore, right?
yeah. And we'll see. We still don't have, I think there's a deadline coming up
On
for
the O'Brien stuff, yeah.
O'Brien things. We still don't even know if we have a second this year. Ideally it would be this year. Definitely could see it being next year at this point, just because we haven't heard anything.
Yeah.
So we will see on that. And again, no idea what moves will be beyond, leading up to the draft at this point.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah. So I guess our next topic here we kind of touched on already. But I guess we can, see if you have any other thoughts. So we have, we talked about the defense, but I think both of us would agree that the Flyers are going to probably look at two guys, Igor Zamula and Ronnie Attard, as two guys, and you look at Attard's experience in the IIHF tournament this year as well. The age of both of them, how much they've developed, how much experience, the fact that Zamula was up with the team so early, over York, and Tortorella's interested. You have to figure that the Flyers are kind of penciling these guys in as potential NHL players right off the bat next year. Where's your head with that?
Yeah, I agree, definitely. I mean, you see Zamula basically makes the team, and the team stated like they're just very interested in the way he kind of moves the puck efficiently and kind of controls the ice when he's doing so with just that big body of his. So I think there's a lot of upside to Zamula's game, and I think we haven't really seen his full game or him be like his true comfortable self at the NHL level as he is at the AHL. So I think the Flyers are kind of looking to bring that out of him. Attard as well, right? Like I think they're high on both, and I think kind of if you look at it with Braun being removed, there's definitely one spot there up for grabs. I mean, we're kind of assuming that D'Angelo is probably on the way out, and that's what it kind of seems like. So if that's the
Somebody
case,
potentially, yeah.
I mean, I would not be surprised if they have a bottom pair of Sealer and one of them, and one is penciled in for sure. And then maybe one guy gets sent back to the AHL, or maybe we could even see kids bottom pair of those two together because they have played together in the AHL as well. And I believe Zamula's a left hand and Attard's a right hand defenseman, so it kind of does make sense, right, to put the two guys together. I don't know if they want to do two rookies together though, but if they played together in the past and they're playing well, it's no telling what can happen. But I think there is options on D for the Flyers, and I think dark horse would be Emil Andre. Like I assume he starts with the Phantoms, but he had a pretty good stint with them just to end the year, and he's been playing pro hockey in the SHL for years at this point. So I think he's a dark horse of the young defenseman that might actually steal a spot from one of those other two we mentioned before, if anybody. So,
but here's the reality, and I agree with you definitely your analysis. But here's the reality: if you are the Flyers, you are not looking at these three names as, oh yeah, if I get rid of Provorov, Sanheim, one of these guys are jumping in
to fill like the top two pairings. Yeah, definitely not. I think that's just too much to ask for basically three rookie defensemen, because they haven't played more. Like, what does Attard play, like 5 or 10 NHL games? Same with Zamula Max, and Andre has none. So for you to put any of those guys into a top 4 role right off the bat, it's not fair to them and their development. And I don't think that's the way the Flyers want to handle it and build kind of those players' games up anyway, right? Because that's not how you build and develop a young guy on defense, is to just throw him into the fire like that, right? So
yeah, you'd have to trade Provorov away, assuming you get a young defenseman back. Maybe they take Attard or Zamula's spot in that ranking, right? Maybe they take a step above, but then you have to go out and sign a free agent defenseman at a cheap cost, or at least short term. Maybe you can give him money, but you have to bring him in on a short term deal, like a 1 at most 2-year deal. It's like, you start thinking about how these trades actually affect and what you have to do to compensate.
It's a lot harder than you think. Yeah.
It's not just that. The moves you make afterwards are probably bad. So this is my whole point, is like this constant.
Well, you have to dip into free agency potentially in a week. Let's say you aren't comfortable now with those young guys taking on those positions, and you don't want to do that to them. Well, you have to sign another defenseman out of the free agent market in a very weak pool to step into your top 4.
And you're going to overpay them for 1 year.
Yeah, and you get worse as a team. So it obviously doesn't help in terms of a team building aspect as well.
Look, it's possible that would happen. Does that really excite people? Is that what you guys want to see? Like, that's how people envision, like, you guys really want to take a step back next year? I'd rather see this team take a step forward.
Yeah, especially after 2 years where you're drafting 7th and 5th. Like, that could be your high-end talent that you need, right? So,
dude, all these people with this long-term rebuild stuff, I'm show me examples of where it's working. Again, I'm getting really tired of this stuff, because it almost never works out. Almost ever for majority of teams. You look at
Buffalo's just getting good. It's been like
if you even look at the Sixers, literally they traded away every good player for picks. None of them turned out. All the players they traded away better than what they got for it. Again, that doesn't mean for sure that's going to happen, but people make it up like, oh, if you sell off all your assets, you do it the right way. Here's the question. Here's the topic for today. Why doesn't anybody ask them to define what is the right way? They have constantly said, we're doing it okay, what is the right way? You know why they don't say what the right way is and it's a generic thing? Because you guys don't want to hear the answer.
I mean, that's a great point, right? Like, firstly, if you ask them what the right way is, they're not going to give you an answer anyway, because it kind of divulges their plan.
Just talk in circles.
Yeah, exactly. No GM is going to give insight into what they're doing or front office. So that's the first thing. But the right way is a combination of things. You have to draft well. You have to develop your own players well. You have to add veterans that make sense. You mean
like every team is trying to do in the league?
Exactly, yeah. You're all trying to compete, right? But either way, we'll see what happens with the defense. It's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, look, if I had to guess what the right way is, it means we're not, and again, Briere's tried to explain this, where he's like, hey, we're not taking shortcuts. That means we're not going to assume we're better than we are, right?
Yeah, we're not going to sign free agents right now unless it makes sense, or like we're not going to make a move unless it makes sense for where the team's at, basically.
Right, but if you really think about that statement, it means absolutely nothing. Yeah. Like, if you does it actually give you insight into what they're doing?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Lip service, really.
And again, I'm not upset at them for it. I expect them to give us this.
Based on the previous regime, like, they were terrible in terms of their communication. So this new one is going to communicate as much as they possibly can.
Yes, and I think Keith Jones is doing a great job of that, making himself available everywhere. My whole point is, like, doing it the right way is exactly what I was talking about. There aren't a large slew of options that the Flyers can make. That means you're not being delusional and trading to desperately make it to the last spot in the playoffs, right? Like that's not what they're going to do. Okay, you should never be doing that to begin with.
Yeah, they
Like
want to have a window. They want to have
that's
a window where they're like, okay, let's set ourselves up so for the next 5, 10 years, we're going to be competitive moving forward and have a chance at it every year to potentially be in that Final Four mix or something like that, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because doing it the right way also involves getting lucky. Like as we've seen from draft picks, none of them are guarantees. Maybe the top ones. We've seen a handful of them. You know them by name, right? And some of the ones that are successful today, like Matt Boldy, he wasn't a guarantee.
You're the 12th overall pick.
He's
So
right before Farabee, who, by the way, was ahead of progress for Boldy until he had that neck surgery. Now everybody thinks, oh, Boldy is amazing and Farabee is what? And Jack Eichel isn't a number one center. I'm loving watching people say that, by the way, as his team goes on to the finals and he's
playing, yeah, on the
after
first
that
line.
back surgery. He's not. He's never going to live up to his name. He's laughing right now as McDavid is on the shittiest team and he got himself into the Stanley Cup Finals on a really good team. And by the way, I expect him to be better next year. And he's the type of player I would have gone out and traded for Chuck Fletcher, not Rasmus Ristolainen. I would have packaged the deal for Eichel for the game changer. If you want to talk about doing it the right way, you package for a guy that you will not find in the draft and you will not find on free agency. You can find Rasmus Ristolainen in free agency. You can draft a Rasmus Ristolainen. The odds of finding another Jack Eichel, pretty slim. Maybe we'll get one this year, but there's like 2 of them available, 3 of them available in the deepest draft. It's like, anyway. All right. Let's get into our final segment here and let's talk playoffs. I'll let you go into stats and stuff like that because I don't really have to be pulled off, but let's just
all the stats. We're good.
Perfect. So let's just, I guess, summarize. We'll bring it home. All of our predictions were wrong. Nobody guessed this final. Sorry.
No.
Maybe Vegas you guessed. They I would say they were some people's favorite. But you got Vegas and the Florida Panthers. In a competition, I would imagine there is no favorite at this point. You can try to tell me that there is, but both have a great story. Both have their strengths in this tournament. And I do see it going potentially 7 games. I mean,
I hope
it's gonna be a pretty wild series. My pick doesn't exist at the moment. I want
to give a pick for the pod, Yariv. You got.
I'll pick one. The problem is I can make a case for either one winning.
I know, but what's your gut tell you? That's what we need here. So that people want to know. They're going to place all their life savings right now on what you select, Yariv.
My gut says, bet on the hot team in Florida.
Okay.
But then at the same
time... Your intellect says go with Vegas.
Yeah, because Vegas is the better team defensively. So I'm like, I'll go with Florida just off the sheer fact that Bob has been fantastic and they have the edge in net. And
awesome.
I would imagine you'll probably pick something similar.
Yeah, so my thoughts, Florida, Vegas, first off, nobody, I don't care who you are, if you're trying to say that, hey, I knew Florida was making it to the Cup, like, fuck off on that one. That's definitely not the case. If you did bet, like, if you threw a $10 bet saying Florida's making it to the Cup just for shits and giggles, like, kudos. That was a smart move. I should have done that. Vegas, though, I'm sure a lot of people had Vegas as a pick. They were first team in the Western Conference, so it makes sense. Personally, my pick was Tampa, Dallas. I was very wrong, so don't worry.
I think
we all kind of were. I'm gonna go with
Dallas.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Florida as well. Reason being is I just want to see Bob win the Cup now, so I'm invested. It's not really a rational reason. I always was a big fan of Bob, so I just think at this point I'd love to see him win. Also, you got some, Mark Stahl there. I don't think he's ever won a Cup, so that'd be interesting to see as well. Though I don't think I'm too disappointed with either team coming out of it. I wouldn't mind to see Vegas win. Obviously, I think, though, Florida is more the pick for me, too, just because, they've been in the league a lot longer. See Vegas win so early, and they're
Matthew Tkachuk's kind of a favorite right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially here in Philly.
Everybody would love him if he's on the Flyers, that's for sure. So just a couple stats I want to bring up as well, just kind of relating to the playoffs here. So, when looking at it, first off, the playoff goal leaders after the third round here they are. It is 13 goals for Leon Draisaitl, 10 goals for Rupai Hintz, 10 goals for William Karlsson, 9 goals for Matthew Tkachuk, 9 goals for Jonathan Marchessault. So you have 3 of the top 5 in playoff goal leaders that are in the final. Hintz was in the
Crazy that
final 4.
Draisaitl's still in first.
Crazy that Draisaitl's still the leader when he was out in the second round of the playoffs. So that just shows like the talent level there. I wanted to go over playoff point leaders as well.
I think he was a fourth overall pick.
Yeah, he was. So playoff point leaders are Rupai Hintz, 24 points. He's been eliminated. Matthew Tkachuk, 21 points. He is still in the playoffs, obviously. Connor McDavid, 20 points. He's been eliminated. Jason Robertson, 18 points. He's been eliminated. And Leon Draisaitl, 18 points. He's been eliminated. So 4 out of the top 5 in terms of point leaders have been eliminated. So it just shows
talent. High-end talent.
Yeah, so it just shows, right, like those generational guys, they definitely score a ton of points, and if they had the depth behind them, they probably would be in the finals right now, but they don't. I would argue though Dallas has has a lot of depth on their team. I just think that Vegas had their number in this one.
And that's the weird thing why I continue to pick Florida, because like if I would have taken Carolina versus Vegas, I would have picked Carolina.
Yeah, agreed.
And I would say they match up well. And the fact that Florida beat them in 4, it's like, even though I think Vegas maybe even has the better squad, full paper.
I think they're just
full depth.
They're clicking on all cylinders. You have to understand though, like a lot of this
sitting for a while.
A lot of this that'll be interesting to see how Florida reacts with the sit. I think for them, like if you look at the way Bob and their goaltending performed in general in the season, they were really bad. Like their goalies were really bad this season. A lot of games their goalies lost for them, and now you see their goalies playing really, really well, and it kind of shows, okay, when we don't have like a couple soft goals let in, we're in every game, we're competitive. So I think that was the key for Florida. Their goaltending didn't start clicking really till the playoffs or till that final stretch with Alex Line and then Bob eventually taking over in the playoffs. So I think now that that's sorted out, you kind of see the rest of the team rising to the potential, because people did not expect them to get in as an 8th seed, to be clear, this season. Like people expect them to make it in the top 3 in their division, most pundits and mostly everyone, especially after President's Trophy. So I think, obviously them making it from 8 to this point to Cinderella run, but I don't think it's very surprising off of last season if you would have said Florida made it to the finals, right?
It's very similar to the Kings.
Yeah,
coming in the 8th seed, like on paper,
you learn.
They were on the elite team.
The Flyers,
the Flyers
did it as a 7th seed.
If you guys don't remember that season, the Flyers were first overall.
Not good all season.
No, they were first overall first half of the season,
and then dipped off,
and then just could not win games. Just everything started falling apart, and people were like, "What the hell happened?" And then. But again, on paper, it was an elite squad. That's
what I mean. That can happen, right? Like I'd argue a team.
It happens.
Let's look at it. But I argue, look at Boston. They peaked at the wrong time. Like they did not peak in the playoffs. Florida peaked at the beginning of the playoffs. Like this is what you want to do, right? You don't want to have your best winning streak at the beginning of the year. You want to have it now, and that's what flying to Florida has done here. And that's what you want to do. And then the last stat I had was just playoff save percentage leaders. So the first is Aiden Hill, 937 save percentage, who's going to be the starter for Vegas in the series.
Team defense.
Second is Sergei Bobrovsky at 935 save percentage. Third, Igor Shesterkin, who's eliminated, 931. Fourth, Ilya Sorokin, 929. Fifth, Frederick Anderson, 927. So shout out to Anderson, because everybody said that like, oh, you can't do it in the playoffs, but a 927 save percentage in the playoffs, he was pretty good. But it just shows, right? Like people say, oh, goaltending doesn't win championships, and nobody had Aiden Hill or Sergei Bobrovsky as elite goalies or anything going into this season. People thought Bobrovsky was kind of at the tail end of his career. People thought Aiden Hill was a backup goalie, but look at their save percentages, right? And they performed really well. Look where their teams are at. So usually when you have a really good goalie in the playoffs and a hot goalie who's playing well, it leads to success.
Yeah. And if you can play really good defense, their numbers are good.
Yeah, exactly. All that.
And if you play bad defense in front of your goalie, their numbers will be shit, even if they're great goalies. As we've seen it, not just Hart. You've seen it all over the league. A goalie who you know is a good goaltender, and then all of a sudden his numbers aren't great.
John Gibson is a great
Gibson's a great example. He would be in constant top 10 conversations, but he's not because his team is terrible and they've been bad for almost the entire time he's been there.
Which sucks. Hopefully they can get it figured out for him.
And there are never-ending trade rumors about that guy.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to add there, Vasili? We'll wrap
No,
it up.
I think we're good. I think we had an awesome episode. Hope everybody enjoyed, and thanks again, everybody, for listening, sticking with us. I mean, we've seen our numbers rise significantly, so we really appreciate it.
Yes. Again, it's been amazing. Vasili and I are like texting all day, being like, "Holy shit, they're still going up!" And we can tell that people are definitely listening more. So again, thank you all so much. It means the world to us. I mean, like, we're not like making bank here off this stuff. We're doing it because we enjoy doing this, and we, honestly, we were talking about how pumped we were just to get this out. For us
just to record this one tonight. I'm like getting off work. I'm like, it's gonna be a fun one.
I gotta get it out. I gotta talk. So again, thank you everybody. Thank you to Jim Steaks, our sponsor. They will be up and running relatively soon. So again, shout out to them, Jim Steaks on 4th and South. And again, remember to like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell for notifications to find out when each episode, immediately comes out. Typically I release them in the middle of the night. So that might be annoying, but do it anyway. But again, thank you all so much. It means the world to us. And again, we'll keep rolling out content and we'll get more draft oriented as we lead up to that. All right. Thank you again. And remember, always stay great.